Hey, folks. My name is Nicholas Whitaker. I'm one of the co-founders of the Changing Work Collective. I'm particularly excited to be able to host this panel conversation with some of our amazing authors from our most recent book, Leading with Self-Awareness, Starting from the Inside Out. And we're going to be spending the next 45 minutes or an hour or so talking with the authors really about the journey of being an author and what it's like to dive deep within your own self-awareness journey in order to be able to then create a chapter that resonates with other folks. I had the pleasure of reading this book multiple times, but most recently last night, and I was just really, really excited to be able to dive in and kind of talk with folks about their own process of putting together these chapters. As I am an author myself and also working on my own chapter for one of our next books, it's just for me like really a beautiful opportunity to connect with folks and just learn like what some of the challenges were, what some of the struggles were, and what maybe some of the aha moments were that they encountered along the way. So that's what you're going to be looking at for the next 45 minutes or so. We're going to have a little bit of time also for questions at the end. So folks that joined live, if you have questions, feel free to drop them into the chat and we'll pull those forward where it makes sense. And before we get too much further into it, what I'd love to do is like do a quick around the horn here and let folks introduce themselves. And I'm gonna do it in the order that the chapters are in the book. So Kwame, if you'd like to kick us off here, tell us who you are, where you're calling in from, and maybe a little bit about you and what you're up to.
Thank you, Nick. Kwame Asaji Fu, also known as Galen Logan. I went through a naming ceremony last year in Ghana, and that's where Kwame comes from. Really excited about this process of my new identity and embracing that and sharing it with others. I am founder and director of Village Connect. This is my nonprofit based in San Leandro in the East Bay here in San Francisco Bay Area. And this is my second agency. My first agency was in San Francisco called Infusion One, which was based in Bayview Hunters Point, which is where I grew up and where my chapter I speak on in terms of my experience with Shaft. And I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a grandfather of 10. And yeah, it's great to be here, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Grandfather of 10. We got to talk a little bit about that. That's a handful. I believe Jennifer, I believe you're up next.
Yes, I'm Jennifer Leslie. I am chapter number 2. I follow Kwame directly. My chapter title is Be Bold. Um, I am a senior vice president with the PSL group, so I'm still very much embedded, thriving, and happy in corporate America. And I'm so happy to have found my way to changing work because changing work from the inside out has really been at the heart of my own personal mission too. And now I get to share that with others and actually get better at it because there's so many more people sharing their voice and teaching me from their own stories. I'm a meditation teacher. I'm an InnerMBA alum as well, and mother of 3. And I'm based out of Jersey City, New Jersey.
Beautiful. Well, Jennifer, good to have you here. Also another fellow InnerMBA alum. So it's good to have other folks in the room. Lisa, I believe you're up next.
Thank you. I'm Lisa Foulger. I'm based in Costa Rica. I am a retired corporate executive after 25 years, having jumped off that ship 7 years ago. And now I do executive leadership coaching, but mainly leadership team coaching for small and medium entrepreneurs and their leadership teams that are growing and scaling their company to grow and scale the world, make a positive impact in our world. A lot of fun. I'm a partner, a daughter, a mother of 3, an avid learner, and am involved in a lot of volunteer activities to kind of equalize our economies and kind of help underserved communities get access to resources and health and education. So great causes. My chapter is number 12 under the section Living Authentically, and it's titled Opening Doors to Discover Me. So thrilled to be here and engaged with all of you and welcome all the questions that may come.
Thanks so much for being here, Lisa. And Tim, last but not least.
Thank you. My name is Tim Van Ness. I'm the founder and president of Van Ness and Company. And as a leadership and executive coach, a consultant, a program designer, facilitator, trainer, I help organizations live values, develop leaders, and nurture culture. I'm also a founding member of the Changing Work Collective and co-moderate the creative arts cohort here at Changing Work, which informed my chapter and my background and my story. My chapter is chapter number 22. It's in the 5th section of the book. There are 5 sections, and this section is called Opening to Wonder. And the title of my chapter is called Choose Your Story, which is also the tagline for Van Ness and Company. So I can say more about that at some point, but I'm in Orange, Massachusetts, about 75 miles west of Boston. And yeah, you know, husband, a homeowner, a musician, a theater artist, a improviser, and a father of an elderly cat.
I love it. I also am a father of an elderly cat, so we have yet another thing to share there, Tim. Well, folks, so lovely to connect with you all. As I mentioned before, I feel like you've been in my ear and in my mind for like at least the last 48 hours, if not the last couple of months, as we've been building this book together. I've had the opportunity to read various different versions as we've been putting it all together. And Kwame, I'd love to start with you. And we didn't mention it up at the top, but the first chapter of the book is actually called Believing and Belonging. And Kwame, you started with this chapter named Shaft. And this book, or sorry, this chapter in particular really hit me on an emotional level. It, to me, seemed like a really deep dive in your childhood and kind of the influences that maybe have informed the way your life has unfolded. I'd love to talk a little bit about that and like what that process was like for you. And we can kind of maybe go from there.
Sure. Thank you. And again, I appreciate this opportunity to contribute and be a part of this project. And I want to give a shout out to the other authors as well. You know, I found a lot of the stories intriguing, and I took away a lot, and I want to read it again. Well, yeah, I had mentioned before we started that part of the process was figuring out what I wanted to write and what I wanted to write about. Self-awareness has always been a huge part of my life. I've always been reflective, even as a child. I always sort of, and you know, another thing a lot of people don't know about me, and they probably, you know, most people laugh when I tell them, is that I was extremely quiet as a kid. I didn't talk very much at all. And I just recall, you know, people whispering on the sides, you know, asking, am I okay? And is he all right? And then when people used to ask me, like, why aren't you talking? You know, I used to have this just basic response. I used to say to everybody, I don't have anything to say.
Mm.
And so it created a couple of dynamics for me just in regards to self-awareness, is that it kind of created this aspect of thinking that something was wrong with me. And that me not speaking, I realized made people uncomfortable.
Mm.
And so when I started, you know, writing, you know, I wanted to write something that really spoke to what got me here and what had me in the place and the position that I'm in today. And I just went back to the Zipporah Logan, my grandmother. I spent the first 8 years of my life growing up with my grandparents, and it was very foundational. And I was able to connect why I was so different from a lot of my peers when I got older. And, you know, I like to make reference to sort of this notion of a light switch going off. And Zipporah Logan switched my light switch on. And what I mean by that is I had an aha moment as a child. And I believe that many of us, we have those aha moments when we stop and think about it. And the aha moment was that somebody loves me.
Mm.
Somebody loves me. And what I realized today in the work that I've done over the years is that not all of us had that switch go off. And, you know, the beauty about that switch going off is that you don't have to worry about it anymore. All you need is just that one moment to say, somebody loves me, so I don't have to worry about it anymore. I don't have to seek and go out of my way to get people to affirm who I am. And so, I can talk for a long time, so I'm gonna kind of like pace it down. But that was sort of the foundation of why I chose to write about what I wrote about. But also to, just really speak to the readers, that whatever you went through, whatever trauma you went through, whatever, bad stuff that happened, and got in your way, that you can use that, I like to say, as rocket fuel. And we know that rocket fuel can either burn you up, or it can catapult you into, the heavens. And so I like to say that I successfully, through the help of others, was able to shift that rocket fuel to guide me and direct me and give me the ability to help others.
Mm. Yeah, and it definitely shows in the chapter too. I think one of the things that was really beautiful for me about your chapter was it was so evocative emotionally. Uh, what I picked up out of it, and maybe this is a little bit more about like where I'm coming from. There was music that mentioned quite a bit. There was food, like there was this texture to what you were writing that really just brought us right into the experience of what it was like to be you at that period in time. And I'm kind of curious, like your process, like as you were putting this thing together, were those the anchor points for you? Were those sensations and those parts of your memory what kind of brought you into that moment? Or was there something else, another mechanism there that kind of helped you really connect with that version of yourself back then?
A lot of meditation.
Mm.
A lot of meditation. I had to walk away from it many times and come back. And I started with not knowing what the end was going to be. And so it was kind of like chapters within a chapter. But I knew that I wanted to, in 2,500 words or less, be able to string together this experience that this kid was having. And in that transition from Phoenix to San Francisco was quite a culture shock. And I knew that I wanted to convey that because, once I began my healing as an adult, that's what I kept coming back to, is acknowledging the fact that I had experienced trauma. In many cases, nobody tells you, hey, all that stuff you went through was traumatic, but it was. And, I didn't have the luxury of being able to go to a therapist and that kind of thing. So, over the years, I just had to rely on people who I became friends with, that sort of urged me to take a deeper look, especially at why I did what I did and why I did the things that I did that were especially self-destructive.
Mm.
And why am I doing these things? And I just became curious as to, I wanted those answers. I wanted to understand. And then once I began to discover and understand, I was able to make shifts and change the story, change the dialogue that I was having with myself.
Man, to me, it's so much about that is like, how do we reshape or change the narratives and the stories we're telling ourselves? And I'm gonna move on here to Jennifer in just a second, but Kwame, you had one quote that you had in your chapter that I just wanted to highlight for folks if they haven't had a chance to read it, or if they have, just as a reminder of the power of this story. You said, I came to understand that our principles are guided by our values, and they in turn guide us towards our purpose in life. But what happens when we are unsure of our purpose or misguided in our values? And I'm kind of just curious, just hearing that quote back again, what comes up for you now as an adult, kind of looking back on that younger version of yourself, dealing with Shaft and dealing with this kind of pivotal moment in your childhood?
Well, that the moment in my chapter where I wrote about Shaft getting hit by the car, and running away, and understanding that I could not cry in front of, my friends and the people who were out on the street. Um, when I look back and I processed that, I understood that what I was doing subliminally was I was suppressing my humanity.
Hmm.
And nobody ever told me that I couldn't cry, but I knew that I couldn't cry because at that point I was street smart enough to understand that I was going to have to fight. Somebody was going to say something, and I couldn't allow them to say what they said to me, and so I was going to have to take action. Otherwise, I would have had a price to pay, and nobody knows how long that would have took for me to regain, my street cred, my ability to walk without being challenged on a regular basis. But in the work that I do at Village Connect, one of the things that is a standard process is that everybody who comes into Village Connect, we create a manifesto for them. And it's really centered around purpose. What is your life purpose? It's a profound question, because when somebody asks you that question, I think the first place we go is with a cognitive answer, right? I'm gonna tell you what's at the top of my head, but it's more than just a cognitive answer. It really requires you to take your whole self. And so today, my purpose is to diligently stay mindful that it's a natural and healthy act to engage in the process of introspection, seeking and discovering the treasures embedded within me from an infinite power source. Once I discover these treasures, then my purpose is to then unselfishly share with the world. Took me years to cultivate this purpose and be able to articulate it. But that's why this book is so fitting when we talk about self-awareness, because, introspection is one of those things that in some cases and in some communities, introspection is not cool. It's very scary. And so part of what we do at Village Connect is help people to understand that that's a process of ascending and evolving. And so we really strive to help people not be afraid of looking within.
That's beautiful work. Thank you for all the work you're doing in the world. And hopefully we can have some time at the end to come back around and let people know a little bit more about how to learn a little bit more about what you're up to. But just in the interest of time, Jennifer, I'd love to talk a little bit about your chapter as well. Be Bold, Lieutenant. I was just captivated by this story, kind of rooted around your dad's sermon around being bold. Tell us a little bit about this journey for you and how you got into this chapter and what that experience was like.
Happy to, and thank you everyone else too. Well, when I got started and I was what I was planning to write, when I wrote my first little introduction paragraph for our editor to look at, she came back and said, "I've got too many stories in the same narrative area, so do I have any volunteers?" And I thought, well, I'll volunteer. I'll come up with another story. I like to tell stories. And this all sort of happened about a week before I was flying home. So I'm in New York, my parents are in California, and my mom is sick. And so I've been going home more regularly. And so I thought there's got to be something interesting in my notes, because I do a lot of writing and I put a lot of stuff into my notes on my phone. So I was sitting in the airport flipping through my notes, and I came across my notes from when my dad gave this sermon about being bold. And I thought, well, how timely is this? Like, I'm also doing this thing, which is writing this chapter for this book, which also feels kind of scary and bold. So I learned sort of haphazardly a new technique that I'm very happy to share, because I got onto this flight and I sat in my seat with my laptop, and I was very nervous about someone looking over my shoulder at what I might be writing. I was feeling really like vulnerable and insecure about what I might be saying. So I opened up Word and I made my font size like a 4-point, so I could barely even see it. And I just wrote stream of consciousness about what I remembered from that, what my childhood, what came up for me in my own childhood, what was it like to be a preacher's kid, what was it like to hear my dad preach week after week and feel like he was the person in the family who was allowed to tell stories, and sort of coming to like inviting myself to allow myself to be that person. I've been writing for a long time, and this is really the first time I very publicly have shared what I've been writing outside of, my very long list of people that I write to every year at Christmas. So it was all, the timing was just kind of wild that it all just lined up that way. I mean, I landed in California, I got to my parents' house, and I said, "Dad, I got to talk to you about this." And I remembered Scott telling all of us about his writing process and about having to sort of check in with the people you were writing about to make sure they were okay with what you were going to say. And I remember being very nervous, because Dad going to be okay with this? And he was thrilled. He was so excited. He even showed me some email interactions that he's had with Major Girdlestone's wife who is still alive. And I don't know, it just sparked this new sort of era for us, and it really opened up some new doors for me to feel comfortable sharing.
That's beautiful. And there's again another quote that you have in your chapter, which really struck me. You say, "Getting courageous and trusting one's voice starts by understanding who you want to be when you show up." And
Mhm.
to me, this seems so meta in terms of your own process. Maybe you can speak a little bit to that and how that maybe it has impacted you along this journey.
Yeah, I mean, I really, when I set out to do my meditation teacher training program, my kind of way of finding my way back to myself has always been grounded in very much intention setting. And in this next hour, who do I want to be? With this next person, who do I want to be? And I think some of that too comes from parenting and also being the oldest of five and really and also just managing teams on a big scale. You really have to, like, we forget that people are separate people and that you can't apply the same thing. It's not a one size fits all. And being intentional and thoughtful about who do I need to be for this person and who does this person need me to be and what is my role here and how can I leave this interaction with whoever I'm talking to in a better way than I found it. So I think when we get to the nuts of like the starting from the inside out, right? It really is like there's not much you can do until you figure yourself out. So that's sort of where that comes from. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, yeah. And you left a couple really beautiful questions for the readers as well. You
Mhm.
asked, where are you lacking courage? Where are
Mhm.
you coming up short? And how will you make up the difference? And I'm kind of
Mhm.
curious, just in your experience, like where does intention come into that in terms of that whole process of being able to even answer those questions and having that self-awareness to be able to go there?
Right. Well, I think you have to be very courageous to ask those questions, right? And then to be open enough to hear what comes out of it. Like you have to be willing to answer it. Um, I don't know about how, setting an intention for that. Maybe it's just giving yourself space for that, creating a space and a time when you can ask those questions and start to think about what that might mean. What am I going to do with what I hear? Am I ready to do something with what I hear? Um, yeah. What am I
Uh,
saying? Where am I saying no, where I should be saying yes? I think that's also in there too. But I think that was kind of the question that kept coming back to me was what am I holding myself back from and why? And what do I need to listen to my body to find out what it is that's going on in here that's keeping me from being able to do what I want to do out here,
mhm.
and working on that.
Yeah. And maybe just to connect the dots a little bit between your chapter and Kwame's chapter, I think so much of this process of self-discovery is a little bit of a process of giving yourself permission to be vulnerable and giving yourself permission to be bold and to stand out and to offer yourself to the world with that courage.
Mhm.
Um, and I just love the fact that both of you kind of came at this from a different place, but the journey that you've taken gives breadcrumbs for other people to follow.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, yeah, very exciting. Very exciting. It's been an amazing process and meeting so many incredible people along the way and um, finding so much commonalities among all of us. It's been really heartwarming.
Well,
Mhm.
Lisa, I'd love to kind of pivot over to yours. Opening Doors to Discover Me, I believe is a chapter that you wrote. Tell us a little bit about that process for you. And you kind of started off the whole chapter talking about, I think it was a Guam, I believe, or remind
Granada,
me, Granada.
Granada.
Thank you, Granada. And you're talking about all these beautiful doors and all the kind of different views of doors through this whole process. It kind of became the underpinning of your chapter. Tell us a little bit about that and how you came to that as a place to start from.
Certainly. And as I'm listening to Kwame and Jennifer, I'm realizing there's so many connecting threads between our motivation and inspiration and stories. Super powerful. Because for me, the door theme, and I just got back from a 2-week trip in Morocco, where again, more fascinating doors to discover and learn what's on the other side of, has always been kind of a mission of curiosity. So always very curious, the oldest of three, and just kind of breaking boundaries in a number of places, just not ever fitting a mold, whatever that could be or should be or was set out to be. And, and sometimes I have found myself, in very uncomfortable spots. Like I remember one of the stories I shared is when I was in France as a 17-year-old, I just had graduated high school, went on an exchange program, had studied Spanish for a couple of years and thought, this will be fun. I'll get to go to France. I'll be in the southern part and speak with a family that knows Spanish and, just have a great time. And I landed and met the family. They had no Spanish. And my French was a handful of words. And I thought, oh no, a month I'm going to spend here? Like all of a sudden the lens changed. And I remember just a powerful conversation with my dad at the time, because this is many, many years ago, before cell phones. And he said, how fun. This is going to be a great adventure. And I remember thinking, fun and adventure. Okay, yeah, let's make it fun and let's make it adventure. So this idea of discovering what's behind doors has just kind of been a life philosophy of opening up sometimes opportunities, sometimes scary situations, and discovering what could possibly be curious and new and different to explore. And very much like the stories before, it has been a journey of discovering who I want to be, not necessarily what I want to do. So I've had the great fortune of doing a lot of different things over my professional career and living in different places of the world and just experiencing many different things. And having accomplished quite a bit, I got very quickly into my professional pursuit, realizing, is that it? Like, really? Is that it? Whatever title, whatever salary, whatever location in the world I was living, there was always a deeper calling, a deeper yearning. And I realized that was to discover who I truly was and wanted to become. And so I feel like it's a lifelong journey. I feel like I'm still on that path and still discovering and still exploring, still learning. And it's great. I mean, very inspiring, very energizing, and all good. And there's just a certain delight that I experience in the unknown. And if I don't have it, I create it. And that's just kind of something that I have identified in myself. And it's been fun in my coaching career because I can help ignite and explore new possibilities with clients and help them see things in different lights. So it's been rewarding.
I love that. And there's a quote that really stood out for me in your chapter as well. You said, "Doors are dear to me. They represent an intriguing passageway into the unknown. And while some doors may be better marked than others, we don't own any doors. It's up to us to muster the courage, desire, interest, and fortitude to open each door and embark upon the unknown journey." Tell me a little bit about that particular paragraph and what is it you're trying to leave with the reader with that particular paragraph?
Yeah, I think just giving light and giving encouragement to discovering your own path, and that every step along the way or door that you open, is kind of a portal by which you can choose what to make of that. And you can, turn left, turn right, go straight, go backwards. It's all yours to design. And that, kind of empty blank canvas is often exciting, but often terrifying too. And so to kind of look at that with childlike eyes of awe and wonder is, I think, just such a healthy way to live life. And it's not something that I discovered right away. I mean, it's really an accumulated set of wisdom that has led me to that vantage point. And so I just was sharing that because I think there's an opportunity to reframe that for many and to discover, the unopened doors that you get to explore and, see what's behind and, make of it what you choose and what you desire most. And, kind of remove the limitations, remove the barriers, remove the shoulds and have tos and all of these limiting beliefs that sometimes we're bombarded by, frankly.
Yeah, Kwame actually just chimed in. He says, "The travesty is that many of us die with so many unopened doors." Yeah, well, so very true. And Lisa, I'm kind of curious too, like as you were going through the process of writing this chapter, were there any new doors that you came across, anything that surprised you as you were kind of delving into these older versions of yourself?
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. I mean, even the process of writing is something that I have wanted to do for years and years. And I've always been, oh, well, after I do this, or after I do this, or it's not yet time. And it's, I can't possibly fit it in. So embarking on the project happened for me at a time where I was recovering from a major accident that I'd had. And so I had all of a sudden a lot of free time. And I was kind of newly discovering what to do with that. And at first it seemed like a burden. And then it turned into a gift. And then it turned into kind of a quest for, what possibility can I create from it? So it was really divine timing for me to embark on the project. And, I didn't know really where to start. I don't even remember how I first came upon the idea of doors. I think it's because I had been on a vacation in Granada, as I started the story with, and seeing the beautifully wooden carved doors and so many amazing colors and textures just highlighted for me a very stark example of 40 years earlier when I was in Russia and walking down the street with all black doors, completely nondescript and nothing individually defining them, and wondering at the time, like, how would you know what door you would walk through? And how would you even remember which door was yours or where you lived and all these things? And then seeing these beautifully doors, it was like the same sensation. Like, how do you know what's behind each one of these magical doors? And in Morocco, where I was just at, there was a legend that they talk about that it's very intentional for them to have kind of walled entries that are very nondescript. And then you open a door and magically inside is just stunning architecture and artwork and beauty and color. But that their goal is to kind of not stand out. They don't want anything to set them apart. They want everything to be equal and level and, kind of bland. So the door, I guess, metaphor just follows me everywhere I go. And there's different takes on it that I have in each time. But that became just a thread that I realize has really crossed a lot of chapters of my life. So that became the focus for the chapter.
Beautiful. And Tim, choose your own story as the name of your chapter. Tell us a little bit about your approach to that and what you uncovered through your journey.
Thank you, Nick. It's simply choose your story, those 3 words. First of all, I'm just kind of amazed listening to all of you and the interconnections and the overlaps between all of the essences of what we're talking about. Choose your story is Kwame, you were just talking about it, right? You get to a point where you kind of have to choose how you're going to, and Jennifer, you were saying, how do you choose how you show up? The piece around doors, Lisa, you even used a phrase that was similar to that. The title I came up with, actually at the end, it kind of surprised me. Like Jennifer mentioned, we had an editor that was working with us that gave us some prompts to think about, and yeah, we had to write just the essence of what we would write about in some ridiculously short number of words. Had to come think about what would I say? What am I going to talk about? And I guess one of the things that is important to me around this concept of leading from the inside out is, and Kwame, you talked a lot about this, getting a sense of who you are, getting a sense of knowing really who you are in your essence and what your values are and what's important to you. And I'm a big fan of and a strong believer in helping people connect with their own inner knowing and inner truth. And so I think I started there with that concept and thought about moments in my life. And then that process to expand from there really just came from my own self-reflection and some of the homework assignments we had to think through how we might structure a story. And then as I realized what the request was, it was basically the same structure as what I've done in teaching storytelling. So part of my leadership development training and background and coaching is helping people identify personal stories and using personal stories and storytelling as a way to make a leadership point, and making a connection between their own personal experience and what they learned from it and what their teams, or maybe a particular member of their team that they're trying to coach through a difficult time, what message they might take from it. So the structure was pretty common to me around, start with a story, start with a moment when you experienced a moment when you learned something new, or you had to pivot, or you had to make an adjustment and change. And so that led me to thinking about a moment when I was young. I was in my college years. I bounced around a bit when I was young, and I started out in upstate New York, and then I moved out to the Bay Area. So I have a connection to the Bay Area and lived there for 3 years, and then had this moment when I realized I'm really not all that happy with where I am. And a light bulb went off for me, recognizing I actually don't need to stay here. Like, I don't have to go back to school at this place that I just enrolled in, and I can actually make a choice, a different choice, because I'm an adult now. And so that led me on a journey of discovery, and I bounced around all over. I traveled all over the place, and I was trying to study music education and theater at the same time, which was tricky. But it also meant that in order to get into a music education program at a university, I had to audition. So I was traveling all over the West Coast, the East Coast, and I ended up in Colorado. And that's where the story really begins, as a moment when I ended up in the wrong place. I chose to go look at a university that on paper looked perfect. And I was thinking Colorado, I was thinking mountains, and like beautiful landscapes. And this place was out in the middle of nowhere, and you could barely see the mountains. They were like a little, line on the horizon. And the campus, it was a state school, and the campus was kind of ugly, and it smelled like cows all over the place. It's like, what am I doing here? And I had this meeting with the dean of the College of Music there, and she was like, so what do you think of our university, of our college? You got a chance to look around a bit? And I was like, yeah, kind of. And she knew what was going on with me. And she said, trust that. I was like, excuse me? She was like, I know you're a transfer student. I know you're coming from San Francisco and upstate New York before that. And we have great school here, but this place isn't for everybody. And you really need to find out where you really want to be. I was like, she nailed me, because that's exactly the journey that I was on. I was on this journey of trying to figure out where do I really want to be? And then the other fun thing about this chapter for me, so it was a recognition, it was a moment of recognition for me of first of all, that this adult, very important person, dean of a college, is encouraging me to trust myself. It's like, her job is to enroll me. Her job is to get people to sign up, to come to the university. But that wasn't so important to her. What was important was helping me connect with my own knowing. And is this the right place or not? Because if it's not, it's going to have an impact on you academically, musically, and it's going to have an impact on your whole life. So to have somebody see me that way was very powerful. And then to help me reflect on it myself. And then through, then I got to just use my natural inclinations towards spontaneity and improvisation and taking a leap. And I heard Boulder was a cool town, and I was with my girlfriend at the time. She was a piano player, and we were hopefully looking to go to school together. And she was my accompanist for my auditions. I'm a singer. So that was my main instrument. So we're just like, well, let's see what Boulder's like. And it just popped in, and kind of the rest was history. And it led me on this journey that I could never, ever, ever have imagined, that led me to all sorts of amazing things in my life and great work.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned improv too, because there's a piece that I actually pulled out of your chapter as well. For those that aren't familiar with improv or improvisational theater, it's roughly based around this concept of yes and it's an additive process, right? And you have this really beautiful quote and question here, a prompt for the reader. What are you courageously willing to say yes to without knowing where it will lead? And I'd be interested just to hear you reflect a little bit on that, just in terms of like your overall chapter and even the process of writing this chapter. Like, how did that show up for you during this journey?
I have to, I again make a link to something Jennifer was saying. It's like, where are you saying yes when you should be saying no? Where are you saying no when you could be saying yes? And how that showed up, I think my writing is very improvisational in a way too. It's like, and it's a storytelling process. I just start. I know the story. It's in my head. I lived it. I know what I've experienced and I know what I learned from it. But the process of actually writing it down is a process of just jumping in and saying yes, and then adding on to it. And a key piece of that is around being mindful not to judge myself or edit right away,
Mhm.
which can be an easy tendency. It's like, no, I can't say that. How can I say that better? It's like, doesn't matter. Just get it out. This is a rough draft. It's not the end, So just dive in and see what's there and say yes. And what else? What's missing? What else could I add on to it? And I teach there. Yes. And there's actually an exercise called yes and in improvisational theater. And I teach that sometimes to leaders, especially when we're looking at innovation. And ideation and coming up with new, product development or whatever it is. How do you come up with new ideas? Well, the idea is just like be bold. Be bold, Lieutenant. throw an idea out there, and the job of everybody else is not to negate that offer, but is to say yes, and we can also do this. Yeah, and we can also do that, and let yourself go thinking to the crazy, ridiculous dimensions. We get to, in the exercise, you get to like elephants dancing on the moon, having a birthday party, like crazy stuff, but that opens the mind to new possibility. And so there's something in the writing process that's a similar thing. It's like, can I say yes to this and see where it leads me?
I love that. Man, I hear similar types of themes actually from a lot of the authors today. A lot of you started not knowing where you were going to end up. It was a process of kind of dipping back into those parts of your experience over and over again. And then eventually you get this really beautiful narrative and this really beautiful story of self-awareness and understanding. And I'm kind of curious, for any of you, really, this is a question to all of you. And in fact, folks that have maybe joined the call, if you want to drop some questions into the chat for our authors, either about their chapter specifically or about the process of writing or anything that might come to mind. But for the authors themselves, a question to all of you, if you were to give some advice to someone who's maybe curious about writing and curious about diving into these parts of themselves, is there anything that you would offer them as like a waypoint or a North Star for them to follow as they say yes to these things?
I can begin. One of the things that I gave myself that I think was really, really helpful, and I would encourage generously giving to others, is spaciousness.
Hmm.
I think our writing coach had given some different tips around, identify, carve out a significant block of time, at least a couple hours, and, go off and find a place you're super comfortable and super nourished by, whether it's your garden or whether it's out in nature or whether it's your favorite coffee shop, but kind of get out of maybe your office and the place that everything else may reach you at, so that you have this spaciousness. And that was really, really helpful to me to do. And at first I couldn't even imagine blocking off 2 hours to do something like that. It just seemed overly luxurious and selfish, frankly. But I broke into it and it became really nourishing and just a wonderful space. And I heard Kwame mention earlier, just meditating and really going inside to kind of see what's the story and what are some of the ideas that you want to share. That was also very helpful in that space for me.
No, thank you for sharing that. Jennifer, Kwame, Tim, any other thoughts?
Well, I'll share that one of the things that I do as a writer, and this is the first time I've published, but I seem to write a lot somehow. I kept a separate document where I could do kind of a brain dump. So while I was starting to write, I would sometimes go over to my notes document and I would just say, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is really stupid. I can't, all the internal dialogue stuff that's coming up, I would just write it out. And it kind of like dumped it so that it didn't get in the way. But part of the process was acknowledging that I have questions, I have doubts, I'm not quite sure where I'm going with this, and letting that part of me have a voice as well. And once I let that part of me have a voice, then it calmed down enough for me to go back and continue writing. And there's a way in which it's kind of connected to this concept of choose your story, which I just wanted to clarify. We don't always get to choose the contexts of our lives. Kwame, I think you talked about this. What we do get to choose is how we relate to those situations and those contexts. So how am I relating to being a writer right now? What does that look like? That I get to have some choice around and think through what I'm going to do and the story that I'm going to choose about myself as a writer. I'm a terrible writer. I can't do this. It's too hard. It's too long. I'm too verbose. Well, that's part of my experience. So what relationship do I want to have with those aspects of me? And yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
I found having the writing pod and having people to talk to made a huge difference. And even conversations with my dad, I would say loop in the people that you're thinking about writing about. If there's somebody else in your story, if they're alive or around, and that's okay. Because opening up those conversations sort of opened up pieces of my memory that I had forgotten, and other stories sort of came to me. It was kind of like I had to crack it open for the rest to come. So I think having the support of a writing group, the accountability of a writing pod or a partner or somebody who you can talk to or share a rough draft with was very helpful for me. And then I think the second piece that I did share with our writing pod was just reading it out loud. I'm a huge fan of reading it out loud and hearing yourself say it and realizing, is this really how, does this sound like me? Is this me? How does this sound? And saying it out loud. So those are my two pieces of advice.
I love that. Kwame, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of Tim because I did a similar exercise in terms of I created a list and I asked myself a question, and that is what got me here. And what's the most important thing I want to share with people in that journey, in that process. The second thing is, as I mentioned before, meditation really helps to just sort of ground. It helped me to ground myself and continue to ground myself. And it also helped to get rid of the stories and the racket that comes up, kind of like what you alluded to, Tim. It's kind of like, I had a whole lot of imposter syndrome stuff going on in my head, that I was going to write something and submit it and it was going to get rejected. It's like, we don't want that crap. It's like, you're not meeting our standard. And, those kind of stories that popped in my head. And so the meditation really helped. But thirdly, I just say, be careful who you share with. Because people begin to insert their perspectives and from their filters, and it could really get, and I really attribute a lot of that to the editor. Lisa really helped to give me some cues on how to not get in trouble through the process.
Yeah, love that. Well, we only have a few minutes left, and I would love to give other people that might be viewing this webinar today or in the recording, if folks are interested in learning a little bit more about any of you, where can we direct people to? And I'll start with Kwame, if you don't mind. You mentioned a couple different organizations that you're a part of. What's the best place for people to find more about what you're up to, Kwame?
Yeah, thank you. Best place to go to our website, www.village-connect.org. You'll be able to see the work that we provide and the services in the community. And I also just like to make this pitch that, if you're trying to clear your books, I know it's the end of the year, please think of us. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And, every cent, every dollar counts in us being able to continue our work.
Thank you for the work you're doing in the world, Kwame. Jennifer, how about you?
So I can be found on LinkedIn, obviously, but I also write a weekly reflection and some thought-provoking questions on Mondays on Substack. So I can be found there. It's under my name, Jennifer Leslie, but it's the title of the newsletter is A Resourcing Human, since I am a human resources person. So you can find A Resourcing Human on Substack. And then I also have a teacher meditation profile on Insight Timer, also under my name. So those are some places you can find me these days. Being bold.
Beautiful. And thank you for being bold out there in the world and all the work you're doing in the world as well. Lisa, how about yourself?
Certainly. So LinkedIn is a great place. And I have a website for my business that is just www.lisafoulger.com. Happy to connect and share with anyone. And I was just going to mention, Jennifer, I'm starting my meditation teacher training with Jack Kornfield and Tara Brock come February, if that's the program that you completed and utilize. Another strategy. So thank you.
That's great. Yeah, we should all talk about that because I also graduated from that a couple of years ago myself.
Okay.
Yeah, so thank you, Lisa, for all the work you're doing out there in the world. And Tim, again, last but not least, how do people find you?
LinkedIn, as others have said, and the name of my company is called Van Ness and Company, my last name, and it's vn-co.com. VN like Van Ness-co.com.
That's great. Thank you for all the work you're doing in the world. And thank you all for your chapters and for doing that inner work of self-awareness and self-discovery. It shows so powerfully in the work that you've done within these chapters. For folks that haven't had the chance to read it, Leading with Self-Awareness is available on Amazon. It is and has been an Amazon bestseller in 3 different categories. We have a digital version as well as a print version, which I'm holding in my hand right now. And if you're not already familiar with Changing Work, you can visit us at changingwork.org. Whether you're a practitioner or a professional or a people leader, there's all types of opportunities for you to connect with other like-hearted individuals like yourself and to get involved in projects like this book. We have 2 other books coming out over the next many months, so keep an eye out for that. We also have more webinars like this one, more panel conversations with other authors from this version of the book, so keep your eyes out for that. And I would love to end this on a quote. And actually, it's pulled, Tim, from your chapter. And I think it might actually be an interesting way to just kind of like wrap up a little bit of this for other authors that might be thinking about writing their own chapter or diving into their own self-awareness journey. You wrote, "Of all the many voices we hear in our head, thoughts we think, feelings we feel, how do we fully connect with that part of us that can discern what is right for us? Our own truth, regardless, what others or the world will tell us. What is the process of being fully connected to what I like to call the essential self?" And I think for me, as I'm reading all these chapters and I've been writing my own chapter for the next book, this to me really encapsulates it all. Like, how do we discern? Like, how do we trust? Right? How do we say yes to the things that we need to say yes to? How do we open the right doors? Right? All of these things. So as folks are exploring their own self-awareness journey, I encourage you to read these chapters in the book. They gave me a lot of inspiration. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the process of writing these books, feel free to reach out to these authors, ask them questions. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk to you a little bit more in detail about their own journey. And obviously, you can always reach out to us at changingwork.org. You can reach us at hello@changingwork.org. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, as well as everybody else, as well as Insight Timer, if you want to learn a little bit more about what I'm up to in the world. But a big thanks to everybody for your chapters. Thank you for showing up here today and to offering yourself so vulnerably to the rest of the world. And thanks to everybody that joined here live today and for your enthusiasm for everything we're doing here at Changing Work. Any last words before we close it off here today, folks?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
I just want to say, as Tim said, Nadine said, trust yourself. Believe in what you believe. And thank you, Nick.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.
Be
Great connecting.
well, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much.
Thank you.